Hello and welcome to Curiosity Taught the Cat. I'm Jack.
I'm Julia.
And what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the Hellbender Salamander. So it does have a lot of nicknames that goes with it. A lot of nicknames actually, including just the Hellbender, the Snot Otter, the Lasagna Lizard, the Devil Dog, the Mud Devil, the Mud Dog, the Water Dog, Grampus, the Allegheny Alligator, and the Laverian Water Newt. So it does have a lot of nicknames, and I'm sure when you see the pictures, you'll understand a lot of the nicknames.
Yes.
But its scientific name also means hidden gill, which we will also talk about later in this episode.
Yep. So as for where it's found, so the Hellbender salamander is endemic to the eastern and central United States. It stretches from New York in the northeast all the way down to Georgia in the Gulf area, and can be found all the way as far as west as Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. And it's usually found in streams and rivers in these areas due to specific oxygen levels of these rivers and the flow that the salamander depends on. And it likes to hide and blend in under and on rocks.
And then as for what it looks like, the color, as you can see in a lot of the pictures, it's a lot of blotchy, like brownish, red, and black colors, but they do have a pale underbelly. And their color is mainly to blend in with the bottom of these streams and rivers to look like rocks themselves. Now, the size of these salamanders is probably one of the most notorious traits about them. As an adult, they can grow anywhere from 12 to almost 30 inches long from head to tail. So they can grow almost 3 feet long, and they weigh anywhere from about 3 to 5.5 pounds. So they are a very large salamander.
Yeah. And as for like the other physical characteristics of them, so they have a very flat body and head, and they have very beady eyes. You can see in some of the pictures, they have very small beady eyes. And like most other salamanders, they have very slimy skin. They got this very smooth kind of slimy skin on them. And they have very short legs with 4 toes on the front legs and 5 on the back. And its tail, it kind of looks like a rudder is almost what it looks like, but it's not used for swimming as much. So what these salamanders do to get around when they're in the water is they have these pads on their toes that help grip rocks, and they are basically walking on the bottom of these rivers as they go up and down these streams instead of swimming. They do have working lungs, but the gill slits are often retained. And although only immature specimens have true gills, so they have the gills retained, but immature specimens have true gills. So the hellbender absorbs oxygen from the water through capillaries of its side frills. You can see on its head, it kind of had these like frills towards the back of the head, getting towards the neck. And that's what it is using to absorb the oxygen. And it only occasionally leaves the water. So all the oxygen they're getting is going to be underwater. They spend the majority of their life in the water. They make very little use of these lungs, and their juveniles lose their external lungs after around 18 months. And then hellbenders will use their lungs for buoyancy more than breathing.
And then as for their shape, we mentioned that they're very flat. Their heads are very flat. And this offers little resistance to the flowing water. So that's what helps them move upstream so easily in these rivers and the streams. And their eyesight is relatively poor, but they do have light sensitive cells all over their body. So we've talked about this with a couple of other animals. So things like when like shadows go over top of them, they can actually sense these with the skin cells that they have on them. And similar to fish, they also have a ventral line that runs alongside of them. Mm-hmm. And this is used to help with detection and vibrations in the water.
Yep. And then getting into what the hellbender salamander eats, so it's going to feed primarily on crayfish and small fish. There's one report written by a commercial collector in the 1940s. He noted a trend of more crayfish predation in the summer during times of higher prey activity, whereas fish made up a larger part of the winter diet when crayfish are less active. So it seems their main source of food is going to be crayfish when they are active, but when they are not, they have to resort to eating these small fish. There seems to be a specific temperature range that the hellbenders will feed. between 45 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And also, there is a little bit of cannibalism in the Hellbender salamanders. The cannibalism that you will mainly see is on eggs. They have been known to occur to eat the eggs of other Hellbender salamanders.
And then as for how they hunt, they have a very good sense of smell. Like we mentioned, their eyesight isn't very good, so they rely on this sense of smell to hunt. And they can use this by the smell kind of drifts downstream, and so they can smell the fish and everything that they need to upstream, and that's how they do it. And like I mentioned, they have this lateral line on the side of them that detects the vibrations in the water of other fish and stuff. So that's another way they just find their food to eat.
Yeah. And as for what eats it, as you can guess, being a water creature, it's going to be basically anything bigger than it. So you got large fish, as well as turtles and snakes as well. Anything that can basically take a bite out of it is going to be what's going to be eating the Hellbender salamander.
And then as for mating, there is a somewhat of a courtship ritual that the male does. First of all, the breeding season, it begins in late August and it goes all the way almost to November. It just depends on the region that it is found in because it's found in so many different states. They exhibit no sexual dimorphism. And the male will sometimes have a bulging ring around its cloacal glands, and that's the way that you can tell they're about to mate. And so the Hellbender will perform this kind of mating ritual where it will find like excavation site under rocks and such, and it will clear it out and make a saucer-shaped depression under this rock or log or wherever it may find. And the position of it will actually face down current or downstream. And the male will remain in this brooding site until it sees a female come by. And then when the female actually does approach, the male will kind of guide her into the cave to begin the mating process.
Yep. And then when it is time to lay the eggs, female Hellbender salamanders will lay between 150 to 200 eggs over a 2 to 3 day period. And the eggs are about 18 to 20 millimeters in diameter, so they are tiny little eggs. And they are connected by a bunch of cords, usually between 5 and 10 cords. All the eggs will be connected. As the female lays the eggs, the male positions himself alongside or slightly above them, spraying the eggs with his sperm while swaying his tail and moving his hind limbs to kind of spread it around and fertilize as many eggs as he can. He often will tempt other females to lay eggs in his nest, and as many as close to 2,000 eggs have been counted in a single nest. Males also exhibit shelter guarding, mate and shelter guarding. So these females that he gets to lay the eggs and the place where his nest is, he will guard them. Then this isn't, you don't really see this with a lot of male reptiles specifically. Usually male reptiles and amphibians are just mate and move on, but you see actual guarding going on from the males. And studies have found that until the female successfully reproduces, the male Hellbender will guard her in his territory until the reproduction is complete. Everything is complete. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And so after this takes place, the male will actually drive the female out of where she laid the eggs. And he is the one that guards them and incubates them until they are actually able to break free. And this usually takes place, the incubation, anywhere from about 45 to 75 days. Again, is just depending on the region where they're found in at different water temperatures and things like that.
Yep. And then when the Hellbender babies hatch, they are 25 to 33 millimeters long, so not terribly long, and they'll have a yolk sac as a source of energy for the first few months of their life, and they'll actually lack any functional limbs in this state.
And then for their lifespan, there's not a lot of information on lifespan in the wild, but it is said in captivity they can live up to 30 years.
Yeah, which is an extremely impressive amount of time for an amphibian. And then getting into some behavior that the Hellbender exhibits, they're very solitary. They only come together to mate, really. And as we described, the mating is not very social experience for the Hellbender salamanders. And once a Hellbender finds a favorable location, it generally does not stray far from it, except occasionally for breeding and for hunting, and it will protect it from other Hellbenders both in and out of the breeding season.
And then as for population size, they are listed as near threatened. So they're not in the worst shape, they're not in the best shape, but they are listed as near threatened. And in some areas where they are found, they are actually listed as endangered. And the main threats that come to them are man-made objects in the water. And so a lot of people will come in and create situations and sedimentation that block the streams where they go up, and it'll block off areas where they frequently go, and this causes the population to decrease in these areas.
Yeah, and then you also have things like, as most people can guess, is going to be pollution. So, anytime any chemicals get in the water, a lot of places will dump chemicals into rivers, and it can hurt these populations. There's also disease and overharvesting as well for both commercial and scientific purposes. Hellbenders can be used as pets, and so they can be harvested commercially. And there's a lot of research that we want to do into them, so there can be overharvesting in this from the scientific perspective as well.
But the good news for them is that there is some conservation going on for these salamanders. Like I mentioned, a lot of the places where they are endangered, so places such as the Ozarks and Missouri, even Ohio and New York, their populations have decreased so much that local scientific labs there and also zoos create breeding programs just to try and introduce them back into the wild to try and boost those numbers in those areas.
Yep. And that wraps up all of the more factual stuff that we have for you guys. We still got some fun facts left. Don't worry. One of the first ones off the bat, Julia mentioned their size, making them one of the largest salamanders in the world. They're actually the largest salamander in North America. They are very big for an amphibian.
Yeah. Another fun fact about them is they have close relatives in the same family. They are not found in North America, however, they are found in Asia. So this contains the Japanese and Chinese giant salamanders, which are part of the two of the three that are actually bigger than them in the entire world. So they're actually the fourth biggest salamander in the world.
Yep, and I mentioned earlier when talking about their gills and the frills on their neck. So unlike a lot of other semi-aquatic and amphibious creatures, they do not breathe through gills. They simply absorb the oxygen through their skin and through these frills, which is not a usual source of respiration.
And then as for its name, there's a lot of debate as to where the name Hellbender actually comes from. One theory claims that the Hellbender was named by settlers who thought it was a creature from hell where it's bent on returning. Another source says that it has horrible tortures of the infernal regions. And in reality, it's actually a completely harmless aquatic animal. There's no reason. It's just its looks why it's called the Hellbender Salamander. It's a very calm creature.
Yeah, and the entire reason we chose it for the month of October is purely for its name. It is called the Hellbender Salamander. It is not a spooky creature. It's not harmful. It's not going to do anything to anyone. It's just got a very Halloweenish type of name, very creepy name to go with it. And the salamander is very easily distinguishable. As you've seen in these pictures, it stands out. If you ever find one, you're going to know pretty much what it is. It's like I said, it's very distinguishable due to its size. And the only thing it gets confused with is another creature that is called a common mud puppy.
And then the last fun fact that we have about this is kind of end on a good note for this. Members of the Pennsylvania State Senate have voted to approve the Eastern Hellbender as the official state amphibian in an effort to raise awareness about its endangered status and boost its numbers. It at first was passed up, but it was reintroduced in 2019. And on April 23rd, 2019, the Pennsylvania governor signed legislation making the Eastern Hellbender Pennsylvania's official state amphibian.
Yeah, so luckily we do have some happy notes with this animal, but that wraps up everything we have. I hope you enjoyed listening. This wraps up our month of October, our spookier creatures. I hope you've enjoyed that. We plan to do a similar how we did last year with December, how we do the kind of thematic months. If you have any ideas for any other thematic months or thematic times of the year, let us know. That'd be greatly appreciated. There's plenty of fun themes I'm sure that we could possibly come up with. But again, that wraps up everything we have on the Hellbender Salamander. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to listen next week where we're going to be talking about the coyote.